They said she was too old to matter, but in the end, it was the old ones that held the weight. Those were the words of a retired Iranian naval officer who once served aboard the IRIS Karg, a ship that stood longer than almost any other in the Iranian fleet, until fire and fate brought her down in the water she had once ruled. On a quiet summer morning in June 2021, thick black smoke rose above the Gulf of Oman. The sea was calm, but the flames dancing over the water told a different story. An Iranian naval ship, the largest in its fleet, had caught fire. That ship was the IRIS Karg, a replenishment and support vessel, quietly serving as the logistical heartbeat of the Iranian Navy for decades. Though not a warship in the traditional sense, the Karg was vital, a mobile supply base, oil tanker, and sometimes even a training ship. Now, as she burned for hours before finally slipping beneath the waves, the world realized that a silent chapter of Middle Eastern maritime history had come to a dramatic end. Built in 1907 by the British shipbuilder Swan Hunter and delivered in 1984 due to delays caused by the Iranian Revolution, the IRIS Karg had a destiny that defied both politics and time. She wasn't sleek or fast. She wasn't designed to impress with weaponry, but she was built to endure. As a modified old-class fleet replenishment oiler, the Karg could carry fuel, ammunition, and dry goods to keep Iran's other naval ships active on extended missions. Her structure supported helicopter operations, which allowed her to assist in search and rescue and remote supply efforts. Quietly and persistently, she served the logistical veins of the Iranian fleet. For the Iranian Navy, especially after the 1979 Islamic Revolution and the Iran-Iraq War that followed, Karg was more than a ship. She was a symbol of self-reliance and naval autonomy in a region riddled with embargoes and shifting alliances. As Western military support disappeared, Iran needed to stretch every ounce of its naval power, and Karg allowed them to do just that. She sailed not to dominate, but to sustain those who did. The waters she navigated across the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, and beyond were often tense. Yet the Karg's voyages rarely made headlines. She was part of countless operations, including anti-piracy missions near Somalia and naval diplomacy trips to Latin America and Asia. When she showed up in Venezuela in 2021 alongside another warship, many in the international community took notice, speculating on Iran's expanding naval reach. Still, her core function remained the same: keep others afloat. And perhaps that's what made her end so haunting. On June 1, 2021, while near the port of Jask in the Gulf of Oman, a fire broke out on board. It started in the engine room, and within minutes, smoke poured from the ventilation systems. For nearly 20 hours, Iranian crews battled the flames. Local sources say sailors had to jump into the sea to escape the growing inferno. Videos surfaced of fireboats circling the Karg. But it was too late. Early on June 2nd, she rolled and sank into the dark waters. The Iranian government confirmed that all crew members were safely evacuated, with no loss of life, a rare mercy in naval disasters. But what was lost was a symbol. For over 40 years, Karg had quietly kept Iran's navy functional in a world that often tried to keep it isolated. Her presence wasn't celebrated, her contributions weren't televised, and her missions weren't flashy. Yet when she disappeared beneath the water, it was as if an unseen spine of Iran's maritime history had snapped. There was no grand monument to mark the spot, no plaque or wreath-laying ceremony. But the sea knows, and so do those who sailed her. They remember the groan of the engine, the endless drills, the rhythmic pattern of chopper blades landing on deck. And they remember her final hours, surrounded by smoke and silence. As a vessel of support, Karg rarely asked for attention. And yet now, in her absence, the void she left speaks louder than her decades of service ever did. The IRIS Karg, named after Karg Island in the Persian Gulf, was more than just a supply vessel. It was the logistical heart of Iran's naval fleet. Commissioned in 1984, it was the largest ship in the Iranian Navy and one of the most significant assets the country possessed for sustaining extended naval operations. Its design and capacity made it a vital lifeline, especially given Iran's strategic limitations due to decades of sanctions and political isolation. Originally built in the United Kingdom by the Swan Hunter shipyard in the early 1970s, Karg's delivery to Iran was delayed for years due to the 1979 Islamic Revolution and the subsequent diplomatic breakdown with the West. Eventually, it was transferred to Iran during the volatile early 1980s, a time of war and ideological transformation. The Karg's primary role was that of a replenishment ship, officially termed a fleet oiler. Its mission was to provide fuel, dry cargo, and ammunition to combat ships at sea, enabling Iranian warships to operate far from port for extended periods. But Karg wasn't just a fuel tanker. It was equipped with helicopter pads, advanced communications equipment, and could serve as a mobile command center. It was capable of carrying several helicopters, including the Iranian Navy's Sea King and AB-212 utility helicopters, which added reconnaissance and limited assault capabilities. In this way, the Karg represented not only logistical power, but also a symbol of extended reach, a capability Iran sorely needed in regional waters. Despite its British origin, the Karg was refitted and maintained domestically by Iranian engineers and naval technicians. This self-reliance was no small feat considering the global arms embargo imposed on Iran following the 1979 revolution. The ship's maintenance became a matter of national pride and a testament to Iran's ambition to sustain a self-sufficient navy. The Karg underwent numerous retrofits over its decades of service, receiving updates to its radar, navigation systems, and refueling gear, often with limited resources and reverse-engineered technology. Throughout its operational life, the IRIS Karg was involved in many key deployments, often with geopolitical implications. It participated in several anti-piracy missions off the coast of Somalia, where Iran demonstrated its capability to project power and protect commercial shipping lanes, including those critical to its oil exports. More controversially, it was believed to have supported clandestine supply routes during the Iran-Iraq War and may have played a role in delivering supplies or surveillance support during proxy conflicts in the Middle East. These actions contributed to the ship's reputation as more than just a naval workhorse. It was a tool of influence. In 2011, the Karg embarked on one of its most high-profile missions, a planned voyage to the Mediterranean, which would have marked the first time an Iranian naval vessel entered the region since the 1979 revolution. Though the mission was cut short, its announcement sent shockwaves through geopolitical circles. Analysts viewed the move as a clear message of defiance and a demonstration of Iran's ability to conduct blue water operations, even if limited. These ambitions were reiterated in later missions, including port calls to countries like Sri Lanka, India, and Indonesia, often framed by Iranian media as milestones in global diplomacy. The presence of Karg in these missions was more than symbolic. It provided real operational support and increased the endurance of Iran's smaller, less autonomous combat vessels. At a time when Iran faced increasing regional isolation, the Karg became an ambassador of the Islamic Republic's maritime aspirations. The ship served as a training vessel as well, often carrying naval cadets on international deployments, thus becoming a floating classroom for Iran's next generation of sailors and officers. But despite its symbolic value, Karg was aging. By the late 2010s, concerns about the ship's structural integrity and fire safety systems began to emerge. Though overhauled multiple times, its fundamental systems were decades old. Its propulsion systems, built in the UK in the early 1970s, were increasingly difficult to maintain. Spare parts had to be manufactured from scratch or adapted from unrelated systems. Iranian media remained upbeat, emphasizing its continued role in the Navy's strategic plans. But observers abroad saw the Karg as a vulnerable giant, increasingly symbolic of the Navy's limits as much as its strengths. In June 2021, this vulnerability would be catastrophically exposed. The early morning of June 2, 2021, was unusually warm off the coast of Jask, a port city in southern Iran facing the Gulf of Oman. The IRIS Karg had been anchored near the port, reportedly undergoing a routine training mission with a complement of naval cadets and crew. At around 2:25 a.m., a fire broke out in one of the ship's lower decks, an inferno that quickly escalated beyond the control of the crew. Within minutes, thick black smoke rose from the ship's stern, visible from the coastline. Despite their rapid response, the crew found themselves battling a fire that had already compromised the vessel's electrical systems and internal bulkheads. Eyewitness accounts suggest that the fire may have originated in the engine room, where decades-old wiring and outdated control systems posed chronic fire risks. Iranian state media initially referred to it as a technical malfunction, a vague descriptor often used in politically sensitive contexts. What's clear is that the Karg's aging structure and compromised safety mechanisms accelerated the spread of the blaze. For a ship once hailed as a pillar of naval endurance, its decline was now playing out in full view, its steel carcass illuminated by flames. Over the next several hours, Iranian rescue teams fought tirelessly to contain the fire. Naval helicopters were dispatched from the nearby port to airlift critical equipment and personnel. Fireboats circled the Karg, dousing it with seawater in a desperate bid to prevent the fire from reaching the ship's fuel stores, a potentially catastrophic outcome. Videos from the scene circulated on social media, showing desperate attempts by sailors to suppress the blaze with handheld extinguishers and hoses, their silhouettes barely visible through the thick, acrid smoke. The footage struck a painful chord among Iranians, many of whom had grown up seeing the Karg as a symbol of national resilience. As the fire raged on, the situation worsened. Structural damage to the lower hull made internal access nearly impossible. Emergency hatches were jammed, and reports emerged of compartments being sealed off to contain the fire, a move that likely saved the ship from a quicker demise but may have trapped equipment and potentially endangered some crew. By midday, the Iranian Navy made the difficult decision to abandon ship. Miraculously, all 400-plus crew and cadets were safely evacuated, with only a few sustaining minor injuries. It was a rare instance of effective crisis management amidst a rapidly deteriorating situation. For the rest of the day, the Karg continued to burn as it listed heavily to one side. Despite firefighting efforts, the fire had compromised the ship's buoyancy. Finally, after more than 20 hours ablaze, the IRIS Karg sank beneath the waters of the Gulf of Oman. There was no dramatic explosion, no Hollywood-style climax, just the slow, inevitable descent of a once great vessel into the depths. The ocean claimed it quietly, almost respectfully, as if acknowledging the ship's decades of service. The loss of the Karg sent ripples through Iran's military and political establishment. It wasn't just a logistical setback, it was a blow to national pride. Official statements from Tehran attempted to control the narrative, framing the incident as a tragic but honorable end to a faithful servant of the Republic. Analysts, however, pointed to the deeper implications. Iran's naval capability had suffered a major setback, one that would take years to fully recover from. The ship's unique ability to refuel and resupply others at sea could not be easily replaced. It had been Iran's only true replenishment ship. In the weeks that followed, Iranian state media released retrospective tributes chronicling the Karg's contributions over the years, from anti-piracy operations to diplomatic port calls. Documentaries and interviews with former crew members painted a picture of loyalty and sacrifice, turning the ship into a martyr of sorts. Naval cadets who had served aboard the vessel were honored in public ceremonies, and the government announced plans to accelerate the development of a replacement vessel, though few believed such a feat could be accomplished quickly. International reactions were mixed. Western media viewed the incident as emblematic of Iran's aging military infrastructure and the broader challenges facing a country under extensive sanctions. Naval analysts noted that the Karg's sinking marked a significant reduction in Iran's blue water capabilities, further limiting its ability to project power beyond the Strait of Hormuz. Yet some observers expressed admiration for the crew's ability to evacuate safely, interpreting it as a small victory amid disaster. More quietly, the ship's sinking prompted discussions within Iran about the real state of its military hardware. Could other aging vessels suffer the same fate? What systems were in place to prevent a repeat disaster? These questions filtered into military academies and defense circles, prompting a rare moment of introspection. Even among hardliners, there was acknowledgement that pride alone could not keep a navy afloat. With the Karg now resting on the ocean floor, the Iranian Navy was left to reckon with its absence. The void it left wasn't just practical, it was deeply symbolic. A ship that had once defied embargoes, sailed to distant ports, and carried the hopes of a besieged navy was gone. And in its absence, the waters of the Gulf of Oman seemed quieter, as if mourning a fallen giant. The fire aboard the IRIS Karg began in the early morning hours of June 2, 2021, while the vessel was on a routine training mission in the Gulf of Oman near the port of Jask. The details remain partially obscured by official silence. But what is known paints a grim picture. A fire broke out in the engine room and quickly spread through the ship's compartments. Despite the crew's best efforts, the blaze overwhelmed onboard fire suppression systems. Within hours, thick plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from the ship, a modern tragedy unfolding on waters long associated with geopolitical tension. Eyewitness reports from Iranian media and regional sources indicated that the fire started deep below deck. The cause was never publicly confirmed, but analysts speculated on aging electrical systems or fuel leaks in the engine room. These theories gained weight as stories circulated of the Karg's increasingly strained mechanical systems. For years, the vessel had been sustained through ingenuity and necessity, with parts reverse-engineered or repurposed from unrelated equipment. In such a fragile state, even a minor spark could prove disastrous. On that morning, it did. The Iranian Navy responded quickly. Nearby vessels and helicopters from the Bandar Abbas base were dispatched to assist with firefighting and evacuation. Over 400 crew members were on board at the time, including trainees. Thanks to coordinated rescue efforts, most of them were successfully evacuated. Videos from state media showed sailors jumping into the sea and being pulled into rescue boats. The images, though sanitized, still captured the desperation of the moment. The Karg, Iran's flagship of endurance, was no longer a source of pride. It had become a desperate inferno at sea. Despite a 20-hour battle to control the blaze, the ship could not be saved. By mid-afternoon on June 2nd, the IRIS Karg began listing to port. Water flooded the lower compartments as fire crews could no longer contain the damage. Around midnight, the once proud vessel capsized and sank beneath the waters it had patrolled for decades. Iranian officials confirmed the loss the next day, framing it as an accident under investigation. However, many observers noted the conspicuous lack of detailed reporting, prompting speculation. Was it simply a case of mechanical failure or something more sinister? Some theorists, particularly outside Iran, questioned whether sabotage could have been involved. Tensions with Israel in the broader regional climate had fueled a series of naval incidents, including mysterious explosions on commercial vessels. While no evidence linked the Karg's destruction to external action, the context added layers of suspicion. Within Iran, however, the narrative focused on bravery, sacrifice, and eventual renewal. The sinking of the Karg sent ripples throughout the region. International media covered the story with reserved fascination. For many naval experts, the loss underscored the perils of aging fleets and the challenges faced by countries operating under sanctions. For Iranians, it was a national moment of reflection. The Karg had carried not only fuel and cargo, but also national identity, a relic of a complicated legacy that spanned the Shah's monarchy and the Islamic Republic's defiant present. In the weeks following the disaster, satellite images of the wreck's final location emerged. It now rested beneath the waters of the Gulf of Oman, not far from the Strait of Hormuz, a globally strategic choke point through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes. Its resting place was symbolic. The Karg's final voyage had ended not in foreign waters or after a mission abroad, but just off Iran's southern coast, close enough to see, yet unreachable. It was both a grave and a monument. Back on shore, memorials were held for the crew. Though no fatalities were officially reported, the emotional toll was evident. Naval cadets who had trained on the Karg spoke of it with reverence. Iranian state television ran montages of the ship's past missions, port calls, supply drops, and ceremonial salutes. These broadcasts, while carefully curated, reflected genuine national sentiment. The Karg had been a symbol of Iran's resilience in a maritime world often dominated by more powerful navies. Now, it was a story of both pride and pain. The government promised a thorough investigation and hinted at building a replacement. However, with limited shipbuilding capacity and ongoing sanctions, such promises remained aspirational. The sinking of the Karg was not just a material loss, but a strategic one. It left a vacuum in Iran's ability to sustain operations at sea. The nation's fleet, already reliant on smaller, less capable vessels, had lost its largest and most versatile ship. The implications would echo through naval planning for years to come. Yet, even in its destruction, the Karg had fulfilled its final role. It had trained generations, sustained missions, and extended Iran's maritime presence. In death, it became part of a longer narrative, the story of a nation's ambition, struggle, and defiance. The sea had taken it back, but its wake remained. As news of the Karg's demise spread, the world began to take notice, not only of the event itself, but of what it represented. The vessel was not merely a casualty of mechanical failure or bad fortune. It was a poignant marker of Iran's complicated maritime legacy. For many observers, the sinking served as both an end and a beginning, the conclusion of one of Iran's most enduring naval stories, and the start of a broader conversation about the future of naval strategy in the Persian Gulf and beyond. Official reports from Iran were initially vague, offering limited information about the cause of the fire that ultimately doomed the Karg. Eyewitnesses and satellite images, however, told a grim tale. Flames engulfed the ship during what was supposed to be a routine training operation near the port of Jask, a strategic location close to the Strait of Hormuz. The fire spread rapidly, outpacing containment efforts and forcing the crew to abandon ship. Videos circulated online showed plumes of thick black smoke rising from the water as rescue boats ferried sailors away from the burning hulk. Miraculously, all 400 personnel aboard were reportedly rescued with no casualties, a rare silver lining in what could have been a tragic loss of life. Iranian state media praised the crew's discipline and emergency preparedness, painting a picture of calm coordination under extreme stress. But even as the flames were being extinguished, questions ignited around the cause. Was it poor maintenance? Sabotage? An accident waiting to happen? No official answers were offered, but theories swirled within both Iranian and international circles. Some speculated the ship's advanced age and deteriorating systems made it a floating hazard. Others suggested foreign involvement, referencing previous incidents of maritime tension between Iran and other nations. Given the region's history of shadow conflict, where cyber attacks, sabotage, and covert operations have been employed without formal declarations of war, suspicions were inevitable. But for the Iranian Navy, the immediate concern was the symbolic blow, the loss of its largest and most storied vessel. International media outlets, particularly in the Middle East and Western countries, covered the incident extensively. Analysts emphasized the Karg's importance, not just in terms of logistics, but also psychological warfare and diplomatic reach. Its presence in international waters had often been a topic of controversy and speculation. Its absence suddenly left a void that spoke volumes. For regional rivals like Saudi Arabia and Israel, the sinking may have been seen as a weakening of Iranian naval capability. For global powers like the United States, it highlighted the persistent unpredictability of the Gulf. Inside Iran, the reaction was mixed. Nationalist media outlets hailed the ship's legacy and the heroism of its crew, while more critical voices used the incident to highlight issues within the military's procurement and maintenance pipelines. Some reformist commentators questioned why a nearly 50-year-old vessel was still active duty, pointing to the broader challenges of a defense sector operating under long-standing international sanctions. In the days following the sinking, the Iranian government released a series of carefully curated tributes. Documentaries were aired showcasing the Karg's service history, including interviews with retired naval officers who had served aboard her. These retrospectives painted the ship as a national treasure, whose legacy would live on in the memories of those it carried and the missions it completed. Naval academies held ceremonies to honor the ship's name, and a decision as quickly announced. A new vessel would be commissioned and named Karg to continue the legacy. The announcement of a replacement vessel was as much a political gesture as it was a military one. While few details were provided about the timeline or specifications of the future Karg, the message was clear. Iran would not allow the narrative of defeat to define its maritime identity. Naval experts, however, remained skeptical. Constructing a ship of similar size and capability, especially under the weight of international sanctions, would be an immense challenge. Iran had made strides in domestic shipbuilding, But the level of engineering and resources required to replicate the Karg's functionality remained out of reach in the short term. Meanwhile, the global maritime community took a moment to reflect. The Karg had been a familiar silhouette in international waters, often monitored with equal parts wariness and curiosity. Despite its associations with controversial missions, it had never been directly involved in open hostilities. In this way, the ship had occupied a unique role, part logistical support, part ambassador of deterrence. Its loss was therefore not just an Iranian event, but a regional inflection point. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a third of the world's liquefied natural gas and almost 20% of global oil consumption passes, remained as volatile as ever. Iran's ability to project naval presence in this narrow, vital passage was now significantly reduced. Although the country retained smaller combat ships and submarines, the psychological and operational weight of a flagship like Karg was irreplaceable in the near term. For now, the waters off Jask hold the twisted remains of a once great vessel. Divers and salvage teams began preliminary assessments, though recovery seemed unlikely given the extent of damage. More than metal, what sank was a piece of modern Iranian history, a vessel that had carried not only cargo, but the weight of a nation's maritime ambitions. Following the devastating fire that led to the sinking of the IRIS Karg, Iranian authorities swiftly launched an investigation. While official statements pointed to a fire in one of the engine rooms as the cause, external analysts remained skeptical. The speed with which the Karg went down raised questions about the ship's overall condition and whether years of patchwork repairs had masked deeper vulnerabilities. Satellite imagery and amateur video from nearby vessels showed thick black smoke billowing from the midsection of the ship, suggesting a fuel-based blaze, especially dangerous on a vessel designed to carry enormous quantities of oil. In the immediate aftermath, Iranian naval officials claimed all 400 crew members were safely evacuated. Fortunately, no loss of life was reported, but the loss of the Karg sent a ripple through Iranian military and political circles. The ship had not only served as a critical logistics lifeline, but had also become a symbol of the Navy's endurance under duress. Its loss, especially in non-combat circumstances, struck a blow to morale. Iran's state media sought to portray the incident with resilience, praising the bravery of the crew and emphasizing the speed of the evacuation as a testament to naval discipline and preparedness. Ceremonies honoring the Karg were held in Bandar Abbas, with state-run television airing tributes and documentaries detailing its history. Yet, beneath the patriotic tone, there was unmistakable concern. The Karg had been a one-of-a-kind asset. Iran had no direct replacement ready, and its loss left a strategic gap that couldn't easily be filled. The Karg's demise reignited debates over Iran's naval modernization efforts. Analysts within and outside the country pointed to the aging nature of Iran's fleet, much of which relied on decades-old vessels or retrofitted commercial ships. With sanctions hampering the import of advanced marine technology, Iran's navy had long struggled to maintain parity with regional rivals such as Saudi Arabia or the UAE. The Karg's sinking served as a stark reminder of this disadvantage. In response, Iranian officials reaffirmed their commitment to naval self-reliance. Plans were announced for the acceleration of domestic shipbuilding programs. State media highlighted existing projects such as the Makran, a converted oil tanker turned forward base ship, as part of a new class of maritime platforms designed to extend Iran's reach. The Makran, larger and more modern than the Karg, was now touted as the future of Iranian blue water ambition. However, critics noted that Makran lacked the full operational capabilities of a traditional replenishment ship, particularly in underway refueling, a core role that Karg had fulfilled. International observers viewed the loss of Karg through a geopolitical lens. For adversaries like Israel and the United States, the sinking of the vessel was noted as a setback to Iran's ability to support long-distance operations, particularly in contested zones such as the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean. Naval analysts also speculated on the implications for Iran's partnerships with allied groups and proxy forces, whose maritime logistics might now face greater limitations. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories flourished online. Some speculated that the fire was not accidental, but the result of sabotage, a covert operation carried out by a hostile nation. Others questioned whether the blaze was truly contained or whether munitions on board might have contributed to the intensity of the destruction. No concrete evidence emerged, and Iranian authorities maintain that it was a technical failure exacerbated by the ship's age. The Karg's sudden disappearance also stirred sentiment among the naval community. Former officers and crew members took to social media and state broadcasts to share memories, expressing both pride and sorrow. The ship had served for over 3 decades, training hundreds of naval cadets and appearing in countless missions that helped shape Iran's modern maritime doctrine. For many, the Karg was more than a warship. It was an institution. In historical terms, the loss of the IRIS Karg represents a pivotal moment for Iran's navy. It marked the end of an era, the era of reliance on legacy hardware adapted for a modern purpose. Moving forward, Iran would face a choice: either double down on domestic innovation or seek new partnerships willing to break international isolation. For now, the Macron and its sister ships must carry the burden that once rested on the Karg's broad deck. As waves closed over the vessel in the Gulf of Oman, so too did a chapter in Iran's maritime legacy. But in that loss, a new urgency emerged, a motivation to adapt, evolve, and perhaps, in time, replace what had been lost not only in steel and rivets, but in spirit. The IRIS Karg met her end in June 2021, and with it came the close of a defining chapter in Iran's naval history. Early in the morning of June 2nd, while near the port of Jask on the Gulf of Oman, reports surfaced that a fire had broken out in the engine room. For more than 20 relentless hours, crew members fought to contain the flames. But by dawn on June 3rd, the Karg had lost her battle. Listing sharply to one side, the ship gave into the sea, sinking beneath the waves that had carried her for nearly 4 decades. All 400 crew members were safely rescued, according to official reports. Yet for Iran, the loss was deeper than steel and fire. The Karg was not just a ship, it was a symbol, a platform for power projection, a floating memory of missions that had spanned continents. Her disappearance beneath the waves struck an emotional chord in Iran's military community. It was a moment of silence for a once proud vessel that had refused to disappear quietly. Theories emerged almost instantly: mechanical failure, sabotage, an aging structure long past its prime. Each offered plausible explanations. In a region defined by covert operations and unending rivalries, none could be ruled out. Government sources remained firm. It was an accident, a technical failure, no foul play. Yet whispers of more sinister causes continued to circulate, especially among external analysts. The Karg's sudden demise, in such proximity to sensitive maritime lanes, ensured that the event would not fade quickly from public memory. Beyond speculation, the tangible consequences were significant. The Karg had been Iran's only replenishment ship, enabling longer deployments far from home ports. With her gone, Iran's navy faced a logistical gap. Suddenly, missions in the Gulf of Aden or support operations near India looked much more complicated. Strategic planners were left scrambling to reassess deployment capabilities, while naval engineers began the long process of evaluating what might come next. But amid the confusion, a quieter movement began to take shape, one driven not by loss, but by legacy. Former sailors shared stories online, uploading grainy photos of the Karg's decks, reminiscing about storms weathered and ports visited. Defense academies organized panels discussing the Karg's historical role in naval strategy. Memorials were held, some public, some intimate. For many, honoring the ship was a way of honoring an era. The Iranian Navy soon announced its intention to build a replacement. The proposed vessel would be larger, more modern, and entirely domestically designed. Whether this ambition could be realized amid sanctions and limited resources remained uncertain. But even the announcement was enough to inspire a wave of hope. In military schools, students began to see the Karg not as an end, but as a challenge, a call to envision what Iran's future fleet might look like. By 2022, a modest bronze monument stood at Bandar Abbas, depicting the Karg in silhouette against a granite base. On its surface were etched the names of key missions and the years of service. Veterans gathered there on anniversaries, some offering salutes, others standing in silence. Tourists sometimes mistook it for a generic memorial, but for those who knew the Karg, it was sacred ground. The ship's final resting place remains undisclosed, a quiet point somewhere in the deep waters off the coast of Jask. Divers have not been dispatched. No salvage operations are planned. It is as if the sea itself was granted the right to hold her in peace. Perhaps that is fitting. For a ship that sailed through decades of tension, across contested waters and geopolitical storms, the deep, silent seabed may be the only place still enough to contain her story. And though the Karg no longer sails, she remains part of Iran's naval soul. Her name is spoken in training rooms, in veteran gatherings, in the design drafts of the next great vessel. The sea took her body, but her mission, her memory, and the lessons she carried still move with the tide. Some stories do not end with silence. They echo. The tale of IRIS Karg is one of them. Though her decks are now silent beneath the sea, her journey continues in memory, in design labs, in the salt-stained recollections of those who sailed with her. In a world where machines are often replaced and forgotten, Karg lingers, not just for what she did, but for what she meant. Each time a new Iranian vessel sets sail, a fragment of her spirit goes with it. In every strategic briefing, every Naval Academy lecture, and every quiet moment at the memorial in Bandar Abbas, her name resurfaces. She is no longer just a ship. She is a story, a milestone, a mirror held up to a nation's ambitions and challenges. Thank you for joining this journey across time and tide. If stories like this speak to your curiosity and imagination, there are many more waiting. Tales of lost ships, enduring legends, and the deep secrets the oceans keep. Until next time, may your thoughts be calm as the sea at dawn.